features and stuff. Well, we think of this as money. But on a daily basis, most of us don't really even use this anymore, right? It's actually quite rare. I mean, maybe some of you do, but the vast majority of money that we use, that people use in the world today, it's just digital bits and bytes. It's just information. It's just data, right? It's just things that happen in here. And in fact, most of the money isn't even produced by the government, right? It's not even produced by the Bank of Canada. Who produces most of the money that exists in Canada?
The banks.
The banks, right? And they produce it through what? Loans. And loans are debt, right? So money is debt, right? The banks are creating this debt by this leverage system, right? So we go in and we put, $100, deposit $100 of our labor. Our labor creates some value in the world, and that value gets realized as money. We put that money in the bank. What does a bank do with it? They take that $100, and what do they make?
110.
$1,000. Yeah, they go out and make $1,000. They just, out of thin air, right? It's like, wow, we just make $1,000. Thanks for your $100. I just made $1,000. Right? And that's how fractional reserve banking works, basically. Well, and that's not just true of the money that banks make. It's also true of the money that the government makes, right? And it used to be the money was a kind of loan, but you can still see that on British pounds, for example. You read a British pound, it says, the Queen says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £5. Right? It's a promise to pay. What is a promise? A promise is a debt. It's an obligation. So money itself is debt. It is debt. Bank money is debt. The money that the state produces is debt. So one of the big questions then is, well, if you have an equity-based system, how's money going to work? And can you have money that is not debt? And again, I said this is a real opportunity. I think this is where some creative, imaginative work has to take place, is to think about, well, if we're not going to move away from a debt-based system, and we don't want a debt-based system, what's the money in that system going to look like? And I mean, maybe people here have read something that has a good explanation for that. I haven't. I don't actually know. But I think that's a really important question that scholars and that lay people are going to have to figure out. What is money actually? And what would equity-based money look like? Would it be indexed to a physical commodity like gold? There's people that have argued that, right? That money is only valid if it's backed by gold. I don't actually know the answer, but I think the question is a really good one.
The early paper money was not that. It was backed by gold.
Backed by gold.
It was the money was a bill. It was like a receipt that you give that you have the gold.
Well,
but it was the gold standard
Yeah.
that was abolished,
Yeah.
and now it's just.
Except what the goldsmiths did back in medieval Europe, I'm sure you know this, but I'll just remind you that the goldsmiths would do this really tricky thing, right? They would realize, oh, people don't want to carry this gold around. So they go and they bring their gold and they put it in the bank with the goldsmith. Maybe they didn't call them banks yet. The goldsmith would say, oh yeah, just leave your money with me and I'll give you this coupon. And you can use the coupon and you can come get your gold anytime. So these coupons go around and people say, oh, these coupons are a lot easier than gold, carrying gold around. You can divide them into different denominations and so forth, much easier. But then the goldsmiths immediately realized, hey, we've got all this gold sitting here, and people don't ever come get it, so we'll just make a whole bunch more coupons for this gold, right? So you have $100 worth of coupons out there, but you might only have $10 worth of gold backing it. So again, you're back to that fractional reserve problem. So even gold-based economies, the problem really isn't the gold, or it's the fractional reserve, right? It's that the representational effect and the material substance it's based on. When those two things get separated, then you get fractional reserve, and then you get the prospect of the bank run. everyone says, hey, wait a second, you know, this coupon he gave me, he gave it to 10 other people based on, you know, 1 ounce of gold that we gave him. We're all going to go get our gold at the same time. What's that called? A bank run. That's a bank run. So the early bank runs are when those goldsmiths started doing that. So again, I mean, I think this is a really excellent question. Whether we need a gold standard. Again, gold itself, it doesn't have intrinsic value, right? It just has representational value. It's just a representation. Gold is only valuable because human beings believe it's valuable, right? It's just like real estate in Victoria. Why is real estate in Victoria expensive? Well, it's only because people think that it's valuable, that it has value. So they're creating this value. So gold, it's not like, it's not like it has any kind of intrinsic value to itself. It's just because people have decided that it's rare and they like it, that it in fact has value. So again, I think what we're at here is a complicated question of, you know, how money works, what it is. It's an opportunity for further research, but I don't think we have, I'm actually not convinced that we really have the answer yet to what equity-based money is going to look like. Yeah.
Thanks for coming here and enlightening us with all of this information.
Well, thank you for coming too, to listen to me talk.
From a secular point of view, in Canada, for instance, we have a system. It's an interest-based bank system. In other places, we don't have any systems. Look at the Muslim world, for instance. We don't have a system. So a person who wants to buy a house, for instance, they have to accumulate all of that money and then take that $300,000, for instance, and go put it in that, which from an economical point of view, you're killing the economy because that money is not used in a better way. Where also, you know, I think us here in North America, we left in a gray area. We don't know what to do. You know, at one point maybe you had some cash that you could invest. You could have invested and maybe made your life a lot easier later. But because there's no access to Islamic banking, we just stayed behind, and we never been able to get into the system where you could advance maybe a little bit financially and make the best out of what you have.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about the universities in Malaysia, and they're trying to create a system. How far are they from creating a system that's going to be accessible to everybody to use? Because right now we don't have anything. Basically, we just sit put and we cannot get anywhere.
Yeah.
So this is
well, you know, that's a tricky question to answer because you're asking me to predict the future. But yeah, I think here's the thing, right? I mean, to me, you know, the system is not outside of ourselves. You know, we decide what the world we want to live in is. And we often, I think we lose sight of that fact, right? We think that that there's a system that's outside of us. But I think in a sense we are the system, right? And that, you know, if enough of us start thinking about like what kind of economy we want to have, what kind of economy we want to live in, what kind of relations we want to have with each other, you know, it's small steps, right? It's these kind of small steps that are going to make big changes in the long run, right? So I think, you know, to wait for governments, to wait for states to figure this out, I don't know if that's really the right answer. I don't know if, you know, the politics are very complex. You know, there's lots and lots of money at stake, right? I don't think that people at the top are going to figure this out and then come bring it to us because they have vested interests, right? I think this is going to start small scale. I think it's going to start, I think the real change, the real equity-based system is going to have to come from the grassroots. It's going to have to come from communities of people working together, agreeing to pool their assets, you know, having faith with one another, dealing with one another in honest and open ways. I think, you know, to me, that's the lesson of this, right? I mean, I think if we just wait for the big vested interest to come help us out with this, I think they're doing some good things, but I think, you know, in Malaysia, it's very clear to me that there were competing interests, that there were, certain conversations you couldn't have, certain conversations that were foreclosed by political power, by economic power, by other people. So I think at the end of the day, the real answer is trying to do this from the ground up, from the grassroots up, and putting together really small-scale initiatives. And it's not going to be buying houses in Victoria, because that's too expensive. It's going to come from small business loans, people pooling their assets to, create community-level institutions that can promote growth, can promote business, and people really dealing with each other in a way where it's like, look, we're going to work. We're gonna put the interests of each other at least as at the level of the interest that of our self-interest. I think that's just my opinion. I don't have any data, but I just don't. I think if we wait around for the big institutions to come figure this out for us, we're going to be waiting a long time. And I think that's why I'm saying, innovate, experiment, imagine, and get out there and create the reality that you want to live. Actually, he did have his hand up for a long time, yeah.
Actually, you have said the basically the entrepreneur and the investors. In the case of loss, basically, the investor will get the loss.
Mm-hmm.
The true fact is both is getting loss. Because in terms of the opportunity cost,
Yeah.
the person, the Mudari, he tried his best,
Yeah.
and because of the time value of money,
Yeah.
he sometimes lost much more as compared to the investor,
Mm-hmm.
because the investor is investing only the short pieces of
The capital.
capital.
Yeah.
So, as per my understanding,
Yeah.
both are either profit or loss
Yeah.
sharing system.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's an important clarification. And when I spoke of the loss, I was speaking of the loss of the capital. I should have been clearer on that. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Sounds like the Dragon Done. The program they have.
Yeah. Right. There's a question back here.
I have a question about the concept of monitoring or raqaba, because there's a lot of effort that's being put into standardization and coming up with these principles that are supposed to be used in order to establish Islamic finance or Islamic banking. However, back to your example of the goldsmith, who eventually had the money and then started issuing those promissory notes that without people actually seeing it. I'm wondering, just in the scholarly arena, from your exposure, has there been any questions on the concept of monitoring and enforcement, and how could that look like, assuming we have those standards? So let's go ahead one step. Now we have a standard, and now we need to monitor and enforce, with the idea of creating mutually exclusive, non-conflicting interest. I.e., the example that you said, the elites will never bring this down to us. So has this question actually been asked, this fundamental question of the philosophical drive, and how can that be, or how can that be directed towards applying and enforcing the standards?
What do you mean by philosophical drive?
So it goes back to, I guess, the concept of, I guess when you talk about the spiritual approach versus the conventional approach, when you look at Adam Smith and how he approached how people interests are and how they tend to fulfill their interests, and they're always looking out for the best interest.
Self-interest.
Exactly, the individualized interest that results from the luxurious lifestyle, or the approach to a luxurious lifestyle, versus a more spiritual, maybe religious, if you will, approach, which is more communal in that aspect. So the drive always comes from in and within. So that the approach of enforcement of such standards in itself, shouldn't that be also questioned?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I mean, well, again, the way enforcement and standards has worked historically has changed, right? So, I mean, I think, back in the day, before we lived in these mass consumer societies, we didn't really need standards and enforcement, right? What was the standard and enforcement? Well, it was being part of a community, right? It was being part of a grounded social network in which you knew the people around you and they knew you. And that worked, right? That really worked in a ways, because you weren't gonna put someone over on someone else, pull something on someone else, if you knew you were gonna have to live with them for a long period of time. Now, and you're gonna see them on a daily basis, right? Now we live in this mass consumer society in which, well, we've lost that, right? We live in these anonymous cities. 90% of the people we encounter on a daily basis, whether we pass them on the street, whether we sit next to them on the bus, we're probably never going to see them again. We won't recognize them if we do. So standards and enforcement really only come into question when you're living in those kind of communities, right? And this is why I think the real change is going to come from the bottom up. Right? I'm a bottom-up thinker. And, it's only going to come from the bottom up when we actually, we decide we're going to create a community that's going to live and carry out its businesses in respect and with relationship with one another, and that will be the enforcement, right? Now, you can look at this in another way, right? Which is this new thing that they call the sharing economy, right? Well, how do standards and enforcement work in the sharing economy, right? Well, they work through ratings, right? So you go and you do some service like Airbnb, and how does someone get disciplined into providing a good service?